It's funny how something so simple as a holiday can make you realize how much you've changed. I remember the last time I came home for Thanksgiving. There was laughter, a warm embrace, and a sense of belonging. But this time, it felt like I was walking into a cold, unfamiliar place. I parked my car outside my parents' house, the old red brick home where I grew up. The place hadn't changed much, except for the ivy creeping up along the walls. I couldn't help but notice the contrast between the house and how I felt stepping into it. The door creaked open, and there was my mother, Karen, standing at the kitchen counter, her back to me as she focused on a pot of gravy. "Hi, Mom," I said, trying to sound more cheerful than I felt. She glanced over her shoulder, gave me a quick nod, and then turned back to her cooking. "Dinner's almost ready," she said, her voice flat. I stepped further into the house, feeling that familiar unease in my chest. I could hear the clink of dishes and the soft hum of the refrigerator, but no welcoming words, no warmth. I felt more like an inconvenience than a guest. In the living room, my sister Lily was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She didn't even look up when I walked in. "Hey, Lil," I said, hoping for at least a smile or a greeting. She didn't respond, just gave a half-hearted wave of her hand without lifting her eyes from the screen. A cold silence lingered in the air. I didn't know what I expected, but it certainly wasn't this. I didn't know how long I could stand it. I had been holding on to this idea in my head, this fantasy of a warm, joyous Thanksgiving with my family, but reality hit harder than I anticipated. There was no excitement, no joy. My mind began to race. I had been dreading this visit for weeks, yet I never thought it would feel this empty. A part of me wanted to just turn around and leave, but then I remembered why I came. I had come to fix something that had been broken for far too long, and I was starting to realize that I couldn't keep ignoring it. It wasn't until later, as I stood in the kitchen with Karen, stirring a pot of soup she was preparing for dinner, that I decided I needed to make my move. I casually glanced over at the coffee machine on the counter. It was an old one, the kind that always needed a fresh filter and a full pot of water. I moved towards it, slowly. My finger hovered over the power button, then I pressed it, and the machine went silent. Karen didn't seem to notice at first, continuing to stir the pot, but I knew she would soon. I turned around to the fridge. I hadn't thought much of it before, but in that moment, I made a decision. I opened the door and pulled out the carton of milk. I unscrewed the cap, poured it out into the sink, and watched it disappear down the drain. Then, I moved on to the pantry. I found the box of cereal that Lily had been eating every day for breakfast and opened it. Without hesitation, I poured it all onto the floor, watching the small pieces scatter like confetti. The crunch under my boots felt satisfying in some strange way. Everything stopped. "Why are you wasting food?" Karen's voice cut through the thick silence. She turned, her eyes narrowing, her tone both confused and angry. "I'm done," I said, my voice steady but resolute. "I'm not supporting this house anymore. No more bills, no more food, not from me." Her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. It wasn't the reaction I had expected, but at that moment, it didn't matter. I wasn't here to seek approval, I was here to make a point. Lily finally looked up from her phone at the sound of Karen's voice. Her eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" she demanded, clearly annoyed. "I'm done paying for the house, the food, the necessities," I repeated, my voice growing firmer. "I'm tired of being the one who keeps everything running. I'm tired of being treated like the family ATM. No more." Karen opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. She just stood there, shocked, blinking as if trying to comprehend what I was saying. Lily's face twisted in anger. "What's gotten into you?" Lily asked, her voice rising. "We've always helped you out. Why are you acting like this?" It was hard to explain in that moment, but I knew this wasn't just about the food or the bills. It wasn't about the groceries, either. It was about something deeper. I had given so much for so long, and it had been taken for granted. They didn't even see it. They didn't understand how much it hurt to be the one always giving while receiving nothing in return. I looked at them both, taking in their reactions. Karen, frozen in shock, and Lily, glaring at me as though I had betrayed her. But I wasn't their servant. I wasn't their bank account. I'm not your personal grocery store, I said softly, almost to myself. I'm done. The silence between us was thick. I could feel the tension building, but I knew I had to follow through. I wasn't about to let them guilt-trip me into backing down. I turned on my heel and walked out of the kitchen, leaving them in the silence, literally and figuratively. In that moment, I knew things would never be the same again. What came next, I wasn't sure, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going to be the same person anymore. As I sat down in the living room, the reality of my actions started to sink in. It felt both terrifying and liberating. There was no turning back now. The sound of Karen's footsteps approaching was unmistakable. It wasn't long before she entered the living room, her expression a mix of frustration and confusion. She stood in front of me, arms crossed tightly over her chest, her face pale but sharp with a simmering anger. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she demanded, her voice low and controlled, but I could feel the heat rising behind her words. "You can't just waste everything like that. That's food. We need that." I didn't even flinch. I sat back in the chair, my eyes locked on hers. The silence stretched between us, thick and tense, before I finally spoke. "I'm tired of doing everything for everyone and getting nothing in return," I said quietly, but firmly. "I'm done being the one who keeps everything going." Karen's eyebrows furrowed, and for a second, I could see her trying to process what I said, but it didn't sink in right away. She shifted her weight, pacing around the room, muttering under her breath. "You've always been the one who fixes everything," she said, almost to herself. "But this isn't how it works. You don't just throw everything away and expect us to understand." "You never understood," I shot back, my voice colder now. "It's always been about what you need. I've been the one paying bills, putting food on the table, and holding this family together, but you've never appreciated it. You've just taken it for granted." I saw her hesitate, her eyes searching for words that wouldn't come. She opened her mouth, but the words never left her lips. It was like she knew, deep down, that I was right, but admitting it would mean acknowledging that everything she relied on had been built on my sacrifices. Then Lily appeared at the doorway, her face twisted in anger, her arms crossed defensively. "What is this? Some kind of joke?" she snapped. "You can't just stop paying for everything. How do you think we're supposed to live without you?" I looked at her, but for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the need to explain myself. "You'll figure it out. You've always figured it out without me when I wasn't around, right? It's time for you both to do the same." Lily's face reddened, and I saw a flicker of hurt in her eyes, but she quickly masked it with a mask of defiance. "So that's it then? You're just going to leave us hanging, after all we've done for you?" I couldn't even remember the last time they did something for me. It had been years of me pouring out my energy, my time, and my money, while they expected more and more, but in their eyes, I had only ever been an ATM. "I'm not your provider anymore," I said, my voice cutting through the air. "I'm done being used." Lily opened her mouth as if to argue, but then seemed to think better of it. Crossing her arms tighter, she turned and stormed out of the room without saying another word. The sound of her footsteps fading as she retreated to her bedroom felt like the final punctuation to her silence. Karen stood there for a moment, her hands trembling as she folded them in front of her. "This isn't how family works. We've always supported each other. Why can't you just be part of the family again? Why do you have to make everything so hard?" I leaned forward in my chair, meeting her gaze head on. "I am part of this family, Mom, but I've always been the one who's been holding everything together. You and Lily have never had to face the weight of any of this. You've just let me carry it all, and I can't do it anymore." Her expression faltered. There was something in her eyes, something that briefly looked like guilt, but she quickly masked it with her usual sharpness. "So that's it?" she asked, voice wavering now. "You're just walking away?" "I'm not walking away," I replied, my voice steady. "I'm standing up for myself for the first time in a long time. You don't get to use me anymore." I stood up then, not waiting for her response, not wanting to see the pity or anger on her face any longer. I didn't need to explain myself further. The conversation was over. As I walked past her, heading for the front door, I heard her voice crack one last time. Please, don't do this. But I didn't stop. I wasn't going to back down. The evening passed slowly. The house was eerily quiet, the usual sounds of clinking silverware, idle chatter, and the hum of the refrigerator missing. It was like the family had shrunk into themselves, each person retreating into their own space. I didn't feel the need to eat. I wasn't hungry. My stomach twisted with the strange mix of liberation and anxiety. I'd made the decision, but there was still a gnawing sense of doubt. Was I doing the right thing? Could I really cut them out of my life? But even as those thoughts crept in, a part of me knew I couldn't go back. I couldn't keep sacrificing myself just to please them. Later that night, as I lay in bed staring up at the ceiling, I heard the sound of footsteps in the hall, then a light tap on my door. I didn't move, but Karen's voice drifted through the crack. Please, just come to the table tomorrow. Let's talk. We can work this out. I didn't respond. I wasn't going to work it out, not this time. The silence hung in the air, but it was different from before. It wasn't uncomfortable, it was final. I could feel the walls between us beginning to grow, but this time, I wasn't afraid. The next morning was strange. The air felt thicker, heavier. The house, once filled with the sounds of family life, now seemed hollow, almost suffocating. I hadn't slept much, my thoughts racing in every direction, but now, in the quiet aftermath of my decision, everything felt painfully clear. I could hear movement in the kitchen, the sounds of coffee being brewed and dishes clinking, but no one had come to check on me. No one had knocked on my door. It was as though they were waiting for me to make the next move. I didn't move. I knew Karen and Lily had to be angry, but I also knew they didn't fully understand what I'd done. They hadn't seen it from my side, the way I had been used and taken for granted for years. I wasn't a person to them anymore. I was just a means to an end, and I wasn't going to keep allowing that to happen. I dragged myself out of bed and pulled on a pair of old jeans. When I walked into the kitchen, Karen was sitting at the table with a cup of coffee, her eyes bloodshot from a lack of sleep. She didn't look up at first, but when she heard my footsteps, she finally met my gaze. "You're up," she said quietly, her voice like it had been drained of emotion. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak right away. I wasn't sure what I wanted to say, if I even had anything left to say. The words I had used the night before still echoed in my mind. It felt strange to be here, in this house that I had once called home, and yet still feel like I was a stranger. Lily came in a few moments later, her face tight with anger. She didn't acknowledge me at first, but her eyes flickered to the milk carton I had poured out, still sitting on the counter. Her lips tightened, and I could see her fuming beneath her calm exterior. "You really meant it, didn't you?" Lily said, breaking the silence. I met her eyes, but I didn't answer right away. I didn't need to. My actions had already spoken for me. Karen looked at me again, her voice softer now, though still tinged with frustration. "I don't know what you think you're proving by doing this, but you're making things harder for everyone. For me, for Lily. You're throwing away everything we've done." "Everything you've done," I corrected, my voice low but firm. "I've been the one doing the heavy lifting for years, but it's never been enough for you, and I'm tired of it." Karen's hands trembled as she wrapped them around her coffee mug. Her eyes softened for a brief moment, as though she was about to say something meaningful, but instead, she shook her head. "I don't know what happened to you. You used to be different. This isn't like you." I felt the weight of her words like a slap, and for a second, I doubted myself. Had I really changed that much? Was I wrong for taking this stand? But I pushed the doubt aside. No, I wasn't wrong. I couldn't be. "I'm not who I used to be," I said quietly, but with conviction. "I've had to be someone else for too long, someone who takes care of everything and everyone while they just sit back and take it. I've had enough. It's not healthy, and it's not right. I need to live for myself now." Lily slammed her fist down on the table, making the coffee cups rattle. "You're just going to leave us hanging? You're going to walk away from all of us? From me?" I met her gaze, my heart pounding. "I'm not walking away from you. I'm walking away from being used. You need to learn how to stand on your own." Her face twisted with frustration, and I could see tears starting to form in her eyes. She quickly wiped them away, but the vulnerability was there, right beneath the surface. Karen stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I don't understand," she said, her voice rising. "Why can't you just come back? Why can't you just be a part of this family again? This is who we are. You can't just throw it all away." But I could feel the finality in my heart. There was no going back. "I've already been part of this family," I said, my voice low but steady, "and you've never really seen me, not for who I am, but only for what I can give. I'm done with that." There was a long, tense silence after that. I didn't know what they were thinking, but I didn't need to. I had made my choice, and I wasn't going to let them guilt me into feeling bad about it. I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest, but I didn't let my resolve falter. "I'm leaving. I'm going to get my things and head out. I won't be back, not until things change." Karen's face hardened, and I could see the tears welling up in her eyes, but she didn't speak. Lily just stood there, silent but furious, her arms tightly crossed. The words I had said hung in the air, heavy and final. Before I turned to leave, I caught one last glimpse of their faces, the faces of the people who had once been my everything, and now they felt like strangers to me. As I packed up my things, only the essentials, I didn't feel sadness, or regret, or guilt. I felt a strange sense of liberation. It was like stepping out of a cage I didn't even realize I was in. As I loaded the last of my things into the trunk of my car, I took one final look at the house, the place where I had grown up, the place that no longer felt like home. It felt like a weight I was shedding, a burden I didn't need to carry anymore. I got in my car, started the engine, and pulled out of the driveway, my foot heavy on the gas. I didn't look back. The road ahead was unknown, but for the first time in years, it was mine to travel, and that felt like freedom. The road stretched out before me, a blur of asphalt and trees. It felt strange to be leaving it all behind, to be stepping into a new chapter of my life. But as I drove away from the house, I couldn't help but feel a sense of weight lifting off my shoulders. The air felt lighter, and the world outside seemed a little less suffocating. I drove for hours, not knowing exactly where I was going. It didn't matter. I wasn't looking for a place. I was looking for freedom, for space, for a life that wasn't weighed down by expectations and the endless cycle of giving. I checked into a small, nondescript motel just outside of town, far enough from the chaos, but close enough to the life I'd left behind. I wasn't ready to go completely off the grid yet, but I needed distance. I needed time. The room was cheap and plain: white walls, a small bed, a window that looked out over a parking lot, but for the first time in a long while, it felt like a sanctuary. I didn't have to answer to anyone. No one was asking me to fix anything or solve anyone's problems. That evening, I sat in front of the tiny TV, flipping through channels aimlessly, but nothing caught my attention. I wasn't interested in distractions anymore. Instead, I just let my mind wander. For the first time, I let myself process the decision I had made. There were no regrets, no second thoughts, but that didn't stop the feelings from creeping in. I couldn't help but wonder if I had made a mistake. Had I gone too far? Could I really live without the connections I had severed so quickly? But in the quiet of that motel room, I realized something. This was the first time I had truly chosen myself. No obligations, no responsibilities to anyone else. I didn't even care that the silence felt oppressive at times. It was peaceful, even in its emptiness. It was mine. I woke up the next morning to the buzz of my phone, a text message. It was from Karen. The message was short, but I could feel the tension in it. "We need to talk." I stared at the words for a few moments, trying to decide what to do. What was left to say? There was nothing left to explain. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I put the phone down and walked out of the motel room. The air was crisp, and for the first time in days, I took a deep breath. The world around me felt alive. It felt like I was experiencing it for the first time again, without the weight of my family's expectations pressing down on me. I went for a walk down the empty road, my thoughts swirling, but I didn't feel the urgency to resolve anything. I wasn't going to run back and beg for their approval, not anymore. By the time I returned to the motel, there were several more texts from Karen. "Where are you? Please come back. We can fix this. We're your family. You can't just walk away." I read through them, but something inside me told me to ignore them. I wasn't ready to give in. Not yet. They didn't understand, and they wouldn't, not until they had to face their own responsibilities. I couldn't keep being the one to fix things for them. It wasn't long before the phone rang. It was Karen, her name flashing on the screen. I stared at it for a moment, then let it ring out. I wasn't ready to talk. The phone buzzed again almost immediately, a voicemail notification this time. I sat in the chair, staring at the phone. I wasn't angry, but I was tired of being the one who always made everything work for everyone else, tired of being the person people turned to when they needed something, but never really cared about. I had been giving everything I had, and it wasn't enough. I didn't listen to the voicemail. I knew what it would say. I had heard it all before. The next few days were a blur of quiet routine. I cooked for myself, something simple like pasta or eggs. I went for walks, explored the small town nearby. It wasn't much, but it felt like more than I had been given in years. I was rediscovering the parts of myself that had been buried under the weight of my family's expectations. But it wasn't all peaceful. Sometimes, loneliness crept in. I missed the connections, the easy conversations, the feeling of being part of something. Even though I knew they didn't truly see me, I couldn't help but miss those moments, the feeling of being wanted, even if it was only because of what I could do for them. One evening, I sat down in a small diner on the corner of Main Street, nursing a cup of coffee and watching the world go by through the window. It was a quiet night, and I was beginning to feel the weight of isolation more than I had before. That's when I saw her. Rachel. She was sitting at the counter, flipping through a notebook. Something about the way she sat there, lost in thought, reminded me of myself a few days ago. She looked up and caught my eye. I wasn't sure why, but I felt an urge to speak to her. "Mind if I sit?" I asked, gesturing to the empty seat next to her. She gave me a small smile and shrugged. "Not at all." I sat down, and for a while, neither of us said anything. We just sat there, drinking our coffee and listening to the soft hum of the diner, but there was something comfortable about the silence. Finally, Rachel spoke. "You look like you're running from something." I gave a half laugh, surprised by her perceptiveness. "I guess you could say that." She looked at me curiously. "Care to share?" I hesitated, but for the first time in a while, I felt like someone actually wanted to listen, so I started talking. I told her about my family, about the weight of always being the one to take care of everything. I told her about how I just couldn't do it anymore, how I needed to be free. She nodded, her expression understanding. "Sounds like you're looking for peace, but peace isn't always about being alone. Sometimes, it's about finding people who truly get you, who understand what it means to give without taking." I nodded, her words hitting deeper than I expected. After that conversation with Rachel, I didn't feel so alone. There was a small spark of hope, a sense that maybe there were people out there who understood what I was going through, who didn't just want something from me, but could offer something in return. The night settled in, and I felt a little lighter. It wasn't that everything was fixed, but for the first time in a long time, I realized that I didn't have to carry the weight of the world alone anymore. I could find people who respected me for who I was, not just what I could do. And that thought alone gave me a sense of calm. The road ahead was still uncertain, but it was mine, and that made all the difference. The days after that conversation with Rachel felt like I was waking up from a long, dark sleep. For so long, I had been trapped in this cycle of giving, of being the person everyone relied on but never truly appreciated. But now, with each passing day, the weight of that cycle seemed to lift just a little more. Rachel and I continued to meet up at the diner, sometimes for coffee, sometimes for lunch, sometimes just for a walk around town. She didn't push me to talk, but when I did, she listened, and it felt different than the silence I had gotten used to. She didn't make me feel guilty for the things I had done or the decisions I had made. She didn't expect me to be anyone other than who I was, which was something I hadn't realized I'd been craving all these years. I started to feel the stirrings of something inside me that I hadn't felt in a long time: joy, peace, and slowly, I began to remember who I was before I was just a caretaker, a fixer, someone who existed only to put others' needs above his own. I realized I had forgotten about my own dreams, my own passions, and it was terrifying to think about, but also freeing. One afternoon, I found myself in a small park on the outskirts of town, sitting on a bench with Rachel beside me. It was quiet, and the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the grass. The sky was streaked with orange and pink, and for the first time, I allowed myself to just be. We were quiet for a while, and I think we both knew there was something unsaid between us. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something deeper, something more understanding. It was connection in its purest form, and for once, I wasn't scared of it. "You know," Rachel said, breaking the silence, "I've been thinking, you're not the only one who feels like they've lost themselves. I think a lot of us get stuck in this cycle of doing what we think we're supposed to do, and we forget to live, to actually live." I nodded, my fingers curling around the fabric of my jacket. I've spent so much time fixing things, I forgot how to just exist, how to enjoy the moment, how to find peace in the stillness. "Yeah," she said, looking out at the horizon, "but you're getting there, you're learning, and that's what matters." I thought about her words long after we parted ways that evening. Learning, it was a strange concept. It wasn't just about fixing what was broken, it was about discovering what was right within myself all along. That night, I went to bed early, the exhaustion from the emotional weight of the past few days catching up with me. But around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I groggily reached for it, half expecting it to be a spam message, but when I saw the name on the screen, my heart skipped a beat. It was Karen. I stared at the phone, my mind racing. What could she possibly want now? After everything, after all the things I had said, was there anything left to discuss? I hesitated before hitting the answer button, my hand trembling slightly. "Hello?" I said, my voice rough from sleep. There was a long pause before she spoke. "It's me, Karen." "I know," I replied, trying to mask the tension in my voice. She took a deep breath. I just wanted to say that I'm sorry for everything." The words hit me like a wave, unexpected and jarring. My stomach clenched, and I found myself holding my breath. "I know I've been selfish," Karen continued, her voice quiet and strained, "and I've taken you for granted for so long. I thought you'd always be there to fix everything, but I never stopped to think about how you felt, about what you needed." I didn't know how to respond. For so long, I had wanted her to understand, to see me for who I was, but hearing her apologize, genuinely apologize, was a moment I hadn't expected. It felt both validating and painful, as though a part of me had been waiting for this recognition, and now that it came, I didn't know what to do with it. "I didn't realize how much I was relying on you," Karen went on, her voice thick with emotion, "and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for pushing you away when you needed to be heard. I don't know if we can fix everything, but I want to try. I want to be a better mother, a better person." There was silence between us, and I took a long breath, the weight of her words sinking in. I had spent so many years resenting her, resenting what I had lost, but now I saw that she, too, was grappling with her own weaknesses. "I appreciate that, Karen," I said finally, my voice softer than I expected, "but I need time. I need to figure out who I am without all of this, without being the one who takes care of everyone." There was a pause, and I could almost hear her nod on the other end of the line. "I understand. Take the time you need. I just wanted you to know, you're not alone. We're still your family, even if we've messed up." I didn't know what to say to that, but I knew one thing. I wasn't ready to dive back into the chaos of my past. Not yet, not until I had truly found myself again. "I'm going to take it one day at a time," I said, "and I hope you'll respect that." "I will," she replied quietly. Take care of yourself. With that, I ended the call. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter. The call from Karen had been a shock, but it didn't change everything. It didn't magically make things right, but it was a step, a small one, but it was something. Rachel had been right. Peace wasn't about being alone. It was about finding people who respected your boundaries, who understood you for who you truly were, not just for what you could offer them. And as much as I had walked away from my family, I knew that one day, we might find our way back to each other on different terms, but with a deeper understanding. For now, I had time to heal, time to rediscover who I was outside of the expectations, time to build a life for myself. And that was more than enough. The road ahead was still long, and I didn't know where it would take me, but for the first time in my life, I didn't need to have it all figured out. I was free to explore, to live for me. And that was a gift I hadn't realized I needed until I was finally ready to take it. As I sat outside on the small diner patio later that afternoon, watching the world go by, I thought about the journey ahead. I wasn't running from my past, I was simply choosing a different path, and for the first time, it felt right. Freedom wasn't just a destination, it was a choice. And I had chosen it.